There's something really intriguing about people who predicted events that then come true. So today I want to look into one of the most famous of these prophets, Nostradamus. He predicted a lot of things that have already happened, and he even predicted some things that people believe will happen. So today we're going to be going into the life and predictions of Nostradamus. Nostradamus was born in 1503 in France, and he lived a legendary life, and his prophecies lived on for centuries. He's a French astrologer, physician, and prophet. He's best known for his book, Les Prophecies, a collection of 942 poetic quatrains allegedly predicting future events. This book was first published in 1555, and since then, many of the predictions have seemingly come true, although it may be debated on whether these poems were actually predicting these events or if it's pure coincidence. But personally, when I see something that is proven to be right in multiple occasions, I think it's worth looking into. And that's why I'm so interested in the prophecies and predictions of Nostradamus. Before getting into some of the possible future predictions made by Nostradamus, I wanted to go over a couple predictions that actually have already somewhat come true, as it seems, from the context of the poems and real historic events. The first event, I'm gonna read the poem first, and then I'm gonna go over the actual event that happened that people believe were predicted by Nostradamus. So the poem says, "The young lion will overcome the older one. On the field of combat, in a single battle, he will pierce his eyes through a golden cage. 2 wounds made 1, then he dies a cruel death." So this is seemingly predicting the death of King Henry II. And in this first line, it says, "The young lion will overcome the older one." And this is referring to King Henry II of France and Comte de Montgomery, who lined up on the fields of France to joust. And this would line up with "the young lion will overcome the older one." And King Henry II of France is referring to the older one. And Comte de Montgomery is referring to the young lion. The second line says, "On the field of combat in a single battle," which the field of combat would be referring to the field of France, and the single battle would refer to the jousting match. Now, the third line says, "He will pierce his eyes through a golden cage." Now, this is referring to the final pass in this jousting match, where Montgomery's lance tilted up and burst through King Henry II's visor. So 2 shards from the lance, 1 went through the eye of King Henry II, which would refer to where the poem says, "pierce his eyes through a golden cage," and 1 shard went through the temple of King Henry II and lodged into the king's head, which would refer to when the poem says, "2 wounds made 1" in the 4th line. King Henry II suffered for 10 days, which would refer to "then he dies a cruel death," before King Henry II died. Now, this prediction is very accurate, and that's why honestly I think it was the best one to start, to really grab your attention and really get you interested in these predictions because of how accurate it was. Now, going on to the next prediction by Nostradamus. Now, the next prediction by Nostradamus, the poem goes, "The blood of the just will be demanded of London. Burnt by the fire in the year 66, the ancient lady will fall from her high place, and many of the same sect will be killed." Now, going into the actual historical event, a small fire that started in the bakery of Thomas Farringer on Pudding Lane in London on September 2nd, 1666, which would be referring to the line in the poem that says, "in the year 66." This fire slowly turned into a 3-day blaze that consumed the city. one of the explanations for the blood of the just, where it says that in the poem, is that it refers to the millions of flea-carrying rats that were killed. And peasant deaths were not recorded at this time, but it has long been held that at least 6 people perished in the fire, which would refer to the final line of this prediction, which says, "And many of the same sect will be killed." The next prediction by Nostradamus comes from a poem that says, "From the enslaved populace, songs, chants, and demands, while princes and lords are held captive in prisons, these will in the future, by headless idiots, be received as divine prayers." Now, in 1789, the French people decided that they'd had enough of poor aristocratic rule, and they revolted. The peasants, which would refer to enslaved populace in the poem, took control of Paris and forced their demands on the royalty. The aristocracy, which would refer to princes and lords in the poem, were taken from power, and they were locked in Bastille, which would refer to where the poem says prisons, and they were beheaded at the guillotine by the peasants, which would refer to the line in the poem that says, "Headless idiots." For this next prediction, I can almost guarantee that I'm going to pronounce some of the words wrong, because they're French words, and I really have no clue how to pronounce French words. So, the prediction goes, Pau, nay, Laurent, will be more of fire than of blood, to swim in praise, the Great One, to flee to the confluence. He will refuse entry to the Piosses. The depraved ones and the Durance will keep them imprisoned. Now, Pau, Nay, and Laurent refers to 3 towns in southern France, Pau, Nay, and Oloron. And Pau, Nay, and Laurent in the poem are capitalized, and this might be referring to that there might be something hidden in these words to look further into. Now, if you rearrange these words, it spells out Napoleon Roy or Napoleon the King in French. Now, in the poem where it says, "more of fire than of the blood," this refers to Napoleon and his non-noble lineage, and the line that says, "refuse entry to the Piosses," speaks to Pope Pius VI and VII, who were both imprisoned by Napoleon. Now, I probably completely butchered every single French word in that poem, but hopefully you guys get the actual overall idea of this, and people think that this poem predicted Napoleon and Napoleon's monarchy. Hopefully for this next poem, I'm not going to butcher any of the words. The poem goes, "The lost thing is discovered, hidden for many centuries. Pasteur will be celebrated almost as a godlike figure. This is when the moon completes her great cycle, but by other rumors, he shall be dishonored." Now, Louis Pasteur, which would refer to the line that says Pasteur will be celebrated, was credited with discovering microbial decay, which would refer to the line that says lost thing is discovered, hidden for many centuries. Now, in 1995, the science historian Gerald R. Gazin ran a story in the New York Times illustrating that Pasteur gave a misleading account on his preparation of the anthrax vaccine. And now that would be referring to the line in the poem that says, "Shall he be dishonored by other rumors?" This one is particularly interesting to me because in the actual poem, Pasteur is capitalized, which could be referring to that it's a last name or a first name or something like that. And Louis Pasteur, his last name is Pasteur. This next prediction honestly sent chills down my spine because of the accuracy and what really happened in history. And it actually comes from 2 different poems, so I will be reading both poems. The first poem says, "From the depths of the west of Europe, a young child will be born of poor people. He who by his tongue will seduce a great troop. His fame will increase towards the realm of the east." Now the second poem goes, "Beasts ferocious with hunger will cross the rivers. The greater part of the battlefield will be against Hister. Into a cage of iron will the great one be drawn, when the child of Germany observes nothing. Now, on April 20th of 1889, Adolf Hitler was born in Western Europe to very poor parents, which would be referring to in the poem where it says, "From the depths of the west of Europe, a young child will be born of poor people." Now, Hitler moved to Germany to action in the years following World War I in the part who, by his tongue, through his over-the-top oratory skills. Now, this is really interesting because Hitler was known as one of, obviously he was a terrible person, but it's undeniable that he was able to speak in a way that got people to believe in his mission and basically manipulate an entire country to do his will. In the poem it says, his fame will increase towards the realm of the East, and this would be referring to the Axis alliance with Japan in the East. Hister is from the line in the poem that says, the greater part of the battlefield will be against Hister. And this is believed to be a misspelling in the poem. The German army invading France, which would refer to the line in the poem that says, beasts ferocious with hunger will cross the rivers. And the greater battlefield refers to the Allied powers defeating Hitler. Going on to the next prediction, the poem that predicted this historical event reads, Hercules, king of Rome and of Anmark, 3 times one surnamed de Gaulle will lead. Italy and the one of St. Mark to tremble, first monarch renowned above all. Now, Charles de Gaulle, which would be referring to the line in the poem that says, surnamed de Gaulle, he was a 3-time leader of France, which would be referring to in the poem where it says 3 times one surnamed de Gaulle will lead. Now, first as a leader of the Free French Forces, then as Prime Minister of the Provisional Post-World War II government, then as the first president of the French Fifth Republic. I'm definitely not a history major, but just the fact that the surname is exactly the same is really interesting to me. And I'm not sure if you're really into history and stuff like that. I'm sure that you might have more to say about this, but personally, I don't really know much, so that's about the extent of what I know. Yet another really accurate and bone-chilling prediction by Nostradamus comes from a poem that reads, near the gates and within 2 cities, there will be scourges the like of which was never seen, famine within plague, people put out by steel, crying to the great immoral God for relief. Now, in the early August of 1945, the United States dropped 2 atomic weapons on the island of Japan in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which would be referring to within 2 cities in the first line of the poem that reads, near the gates and within 2 cities. The suffering endured by those in the blast and the radiation poisoning suffered by those who escaped the immediate detonation, which would refer to the line in the poem that says, crying to the great immoral God for relief. We're now getting much more into modern history with the prediction of Nostradamus, and this one starts to get really, really modern, and probably an event that maybe some of our listeners have actually lived through. And the prediction goes, the great man will be struck down in the day by a thunderbolt, an evil deed foretold by the bearer of a petition. According to the prediction, another falls at night time, conflict at Reims, London, and a pestilence in Tuscany. Now, the great man, which is from the first line of the poem, refers to John F. Kennedy, the President of the United States. He received numerous death threats, which could be referring to, in the poem, an evil deed foretold by the bearer of a petition. And he was gunned down in the afternoon of November 22nd, 1963, which would be referring to the great man being struck down in the day by a thunderbolt. Bobby Kennedy was killed just after midnight on June 5th, 1968, which would refer to the line in the poem that says, "Another falls at nighttime." And the world mourned the death of these two men, being John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, which would refer to conflict at Reims, London. Again, we're progressing more and more towards modern history, and this one is even more modern in the prediction. The prediction goes, "From the human flock 9 will be sent away, separated from judgment and counsel. Their fate will be sealed on departure. Kappa, Theta, Lambda, the banished dead air." Now, on January 28th, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart 73 seconds after takeoff, killing all the astronauts on board. The cause of the crash was a defective O-ring made by Theocol, and believers try and arrange the letters from Kappa, Theta, and Lambda to fit the name of the company. They also ignore the fact that 7 dies in the disaster and not 9, which is referring to the part of the poem that says 9 will be sent away, and only 7 did, so this prediction is somewhat inaccurate, and it's led to a lot of arguments and disagreements. This next prediction is actually so recent that I'm just going to put a disclaimer. I'm not in any ways making light of this situation. It's a terrible tragedy, and honestly, my heart goes out to anybody affected by the events of this day and what happened, and I'm not making light of the situation in the slightest bit. I'm simply reading it because the prediction lines up with what actually happened. Now, the prediction says, "Earth-shaking fire from the center of the earth will cause tremors around the new city. 2 great rocks will war for a long time. Then Arutha will redden a new river." Now, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, 2 towers, which would refer to the 2 great rocks in the poem, of the World Trade Center were attacked in New York City, which might refer to the line in the poem that says will cause tremors around the new city. Now that I went over some of the predictions that have seemingly come true by Nostradamus, I'd like to go over some of the possible future predictions of Nostradamus and things that might happen in the future based on the poems in Les Prophecies. And if you're a paranoid person, I'd recommend that you do not listen to this section because it gets pretty dark pretty quickly, so just a fair warning. The first possible future prediction by Nostradamus comes from the 14th quatrain of Centuria 4, and he wrote, in this quatrain, "The sudden death of the first personage will have caused a change and put another in the sovereignty. Soon, late come so high and of low age, such by land and sea that will be necessary to fear him." Now, Nostradamus believers think that this is referring to Kim Jong-un amid his dramatic weight loss and the consistent rumors surrounding his health. And it has some, really, there's only one line in this quatrain that really could be referring to Kim Jong-un. I'm just not really sure why it would refer to Kim Jong-un and not any other leaders, where it says the sudden death of the first personage. I don't know. I feel like this one's a little bit far-fetched, but it is true that Kim Jong-un has been making the news a lot recently due to a lot of weight loss and concerns around his health. So I guess it's just something to keep an eye on. The third quatrain of Nostradamus Century 3 reads, "Mars and Mercury and the silver joint together, towards the south extreme drought. In the depths of Asia, one will say the earth trembles. Corinth Ephesus then in perplexity." Now, what Nostradamus believers think this refers to is that it is forecasting a huge earthquake to happen in Japan. And this is predicted by when Nostradamus says, "Towards mighty extreme cecity in the depths of Asia, they will say earthquake. And again, like, it's really hard to, just because of the writing, it's very like vague and not very easy to like understand exactly what he's referring to, which is actually where a lot of the speculation around Nostradamus' predictions come from, is that like maybe they're just, really vague, like 4-line poems that somehow referred to events that have happened. But I don't know. I just figured I'd throw this one in here because it's one of the ones I found. Okay, while researching some of the future predictions by Nostradamus, I came across something that says that Nostradamus explained that his prophecies were so obscure because he wanted to avoid persecution from the Inquisition. And he also gives us reasoning as to why the quatrains are not in chronological order. And this would make sense. I mean, if a guy comes out and starts saying like all these crazy predictions and like straight up like, this person's gonna die, like this is exactly how this person's gonna die, you would probably like, back in the 1500s, you would probably get hung for saying things like this. So that, I mean, maybe that adds some credibility to why these are so vague, and I don't know. I mean, it's confusing when you're dealing with things that happened multiple centuries ago that you really have no clue what the actual original author was thinking or like talking about. Now, in Nostradamus Century 2, Quatrain 89, it reads, "One day the two great masters will be friends. Their great power will be seen increased. The new land will be at its highest peak. To the bloody one, the number recounted." Nostradamus believers think that this is referring to United States and Russia finally becoming alliances after their long history of being against each other. And quatrains 495 and 578 also suggest that this alliance might be short-lived. Now, it'll be interesting to see how this prediction plays out, especially with the current situation between the United States, Russia, and Ukraine. Quatrains 991, 547, and 621 seem to suggest that conflicts between Christian and Islamic nations might happen. This could involve one or a combination of the following nations: Iran, Afghanistan, Algeria, Morocco, Pakistan, Syria, Libya, Sudan, Iraq, various nations of the Soviet Union, and others against Turkey, Italy, France, Germany, Austria, Spain, Portugal, Greece, Macedonia, Hungary, the United States, Israel, the United Kingdom, and various allies of these nations. Now, how this will happen? By land, various Islamic armies and their allies might one day invade Turkey, Macedonia, Greece, Hungary, the former Yugoslavia, and Austria, and eventually march towards Italy, attacking the Italians and other forces located there. From Italy, the invaders could then attack other nations in various parts of Europe. It appears that Greece might endure chemical or biological warfare in these conflicts. Algeria, Morocco, and Libya may attempt to vex Egypt by land. By sea, these same North African nations appear to invade the southern coastline of France, Monaco, and Spain, which would move them deeper into Europe. Some of these conflicts could occur in one massive sweep, or they could take place over a period of years. In addition to land war, these conflicts seem to involve heavy naval warfare in the Mediterranean, I'm not even going to try to pronounce these other seas, but the nations of NATO, or its future equivalent, and their various allies appear to eventually prevail in these conflicts. In paragraph number 34 of the epistle, Nostradamus states that Jerusalem might be assailed from all sides, and a Western naval force will help Israel fight off the forces of its future adversaries. The years for the potential occurrence of these conflicts might be 2000, 2002, 2013, 2015 or 2016, 2016, 2019, 2021, 2030, 2037, 2038, or 2044. And the study says it should be kept in mind that Nostradamus was a Christian of Jewish descent, and his predictions of world events could have a religious bias, though not of a serious nature. There's a possibility that Euro-Arabic or Muslim-Christian conflicts might occur before, during, or after the war, which with the yet-to-arrive third Antichrist. How Euro-Arabic conflicts interrelate with the war with the third Antichrist is unclear at this time. Some of them will be part of his war, and some of them might be precursory or unrelated independent events. Nostradamus appears to suggest that the future third Antichrist will come from a region east of the Black Sea. In paragraph number 23 of the epistle, he states, "The grand empire of the Antichrist shall begin in the region of the former empire of Attila." Attila was the leader of the Asian Huns who invaded Europe during the 5th century. Nostradamus refers to the third Antichrist as the new Xerxes. Xerxes was the Persian king who unsuccessfully invaded Greece in 480 BC. The army of the third Antichrist will begin its trek towards Europe from a region between the Caspian and Black Seas. It appears that they will pass through Alania, southwestern Russia, and Armenia, then into Turkey. From there, they will invade most of Europe, and this is referring to Quatrain 554. The naval forces of the third Antichrist will be accompanied by the Libyan fleet into the Mediterranean and Adriatic seas. One of the climaxes of this future conflict appears to be a colossal naval engagement in the Adriatic Sea. Island locations which sustain damage in this war include Malta, Sicily, Sardinia, the Dodecanese Islands, and the Cyclades. Nostradamus states in the epistle that a northern king from Aquilon, an allusion to Russia, will eventually help to set things right. This suggests that if the Russians were allied against Europe and the New World at the start of this conflict, they will reverse their position at some future point during the hostilities and militarily realign themselves with Europe and the West in an effort to quash the Easterners. The war with the third Antichrist, according to Nostradamus, will last for as many as 27.5 years, suggesting a protracted war. NATO, CETO, or their future equivalent, and their allies appear to be victorious over the third Antichrist forces. However, there appears to be great losses on both sides of this futuristic conflict. Nostradamus appears to suggest that various regions will one day be struck by missiles in Europe, the West, and elsewhere. New York City might be the location of a direct hit, as referred to in quatrains 499 and 697. In paragraph 33 of the epistle, Nostradamus states that a pestilence will develop in the future which will remove 2/3 of the world's population. Now, Nostradamus believers believe that this could be a reference to a futuristic nuclear or biological war, and if so, could this possibly be connected with the third Antichrist war? Though we all hope the third Antichrist never makes an appearance, if the predictions about his arrival are true, the hypothetical years are 2000, 2002, 2006, 2009, 2011, 2013, 2015, 2016, 2019, 2024, 2026, 2028, 2030, 2038, 2041, 2043, 2044, and 2049. In his epistle, Nostradamus stated that at some point in the future, global flooding will occur. No specific date is mentioned regarding its occurrence, except that it will happen sometime after the fall of the third Antichrist. This is already a credible possibility, as universal flooding as the final consequence of global warming is quite real, especially with the average temperature of Earth continuously rising year after year due to carbon emissions and other human factors. If atmospheric heating continues, sea levels could rise by as much as 3 feet in the next century, and universal flooding would follow. Some modern commentators feel that Nostradamus hints at the possibility of a future polar shift, as per the text in paragraph 24 of the epistle. An example, the ongoing heating of the Earth could melt the ice in the polar regions, creating not only floods, but producing conditions that could allow for an off-balancing of the Earth on its axis. The gravitational effect created by an alignment of planets within our solar system could serve as a catalyst to produce a polar shift. Another cause could be a collision between the Earth and an asteroid or a comet. If a polar shift were indeed to occur, it would cause our planet to quickly shift upon its axis, making a correction to reestablish a new center of gravity. Now, this part gets very interesting because this actually lines up with the predictions of Bob Ivanga, and she actually does predict that a shift in gravitational force occurs at some point in the future. I know I just rambled on like forever and probably made zero sense over the past 10 minutes, but honestly, this is crazy predictions for the future, and it's kind of scary, to be honest. I don't really know exactly what these predictions could refer to, and I don't know if the people attempting to explain these predictions are correct, or if they're wrong, but let's hope that they're wrong. And again, like I said, like, this is not something that you should take absolutely 100% as fact. It's just something that's very interesting, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to follow the podcast and share it with your friends. It really helps if you give us a review wherever you listen to our podcasts. Thank you guys so much for watching, and make sure to tune in to the next episode where we're going to talk about the dangers of AI and Roko's basilisk.